Welcome to our special meeting of the Midnight Society. My name's Gary.
I'm Samantha.
And I'm Kiki.
We're glad you could join us. We're always on the lookout for kids who have what it takes.
Who really like scary stories.
To join us around our campfire here in the woods.
Now that you're here, we can get started with tonight's meeting. Are you guys ready?
Yeah. Who's first? Gary?
Okay. Kiki said that we all like scary stories. That's true. And that's what my first story's about. It's about a scary movie, actually. One particular movie that's even more frightening than usual.
Cool.
Very cool.
That's the weird thing about scary movies. You ever notice how sometimes it's even more frightening to watch one in your own home? At least in a movie theater, you're surrounded by other people. But at home, you might just be all by yourself. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I call this story The Tale of the Virtual Nightmare. Jay Barzak loved terror. Okay, he liked adventure and comedy too. But whenever he went to the video store, the horror section was always his first stop. His friend, Mr. Rodriguez, was the owner. He loved scary movies as much as Jay did, and was always on the lookout for new, terrifying stuff. One day, Jay stopped by the store as usual. He was psyched because Mr. Rodriguez promised to lend him his personal copy of a special video that had just come in. But when he got there, the tiny store was empty.
Hello?
No one was there. The place was even messier than usual, with cassettes scattered around. And that wasn't all. There were strange scratches on the floor. 4 deep, shiny gouges in the old wooden boards. The mess gave Jay a funny feeling. Should he call the police? But he didn't want to cause any trouble. Maybe Mr. Rodriguez had been moving stuff around and had just stepped out. Maybe the scratches had always been there and Jay had never noticed them. That's when he saw it. A video cassette in a plain white case. Across the top in black letters was the title, Virtual Nightmare. And stuck to the case was a yellow gummy label that said, For Jay. Despite his funny feeling, Jay was excited. This must be the movie Mr. Rodriguez was talking about. But where was he? I'm sure he's okay, he decided. And he picked up the tape and headed home. Jay's mom was in the kitchen making dinner. Jay snuck past her into the den and popped the tape in the VCR. He picked up the remote, then stopped. Why did he feel so nervous? He shook off the feeling and hit play. And there on the screen was a funny-looking dragon, black and scaly. It was flying across a purplish sky, beating its wings. An animal dangled from its claws. That was it. No title, no actors, no sound even. Just the dragon. Jay fast-forwarded the tape, but the dragon was all there was, all the way through. He turned up the volume as loud as it would go. There was some kind of sound, but it was impossible to make out. A grinding, whirring noise. What a ripoff. Jay ejected the tape in disgust. The next day, Jay was about to return the tape when he decided to take one last look. He popped it in the VCR and hit play. But the picture seemed different somehow. The dragon seemed sharper, more real. The funny noise was louder, too. Jay leaned forward, so close his nose was almost touching the screen. And he could finally see what the dragon was holding in its claws. It wasn't an animal. It was a man. Jay found himself clenching up inside, and he dropped the remote. When he glanced up, he could swear the dragon noticed him. It had turned its head, and to Jay's disbelief, it changed direction. Now it was flying at him, its wings flapping, its huge jaw open wide. Jay snapped off the VCR and yanked out the tape. All he wanted was to get rid of it. He ran to the video store, but when he got there, it was closed. The door was locked. Mr. Rodriguez was nowhere to be found. Now Jay was really scared. Still holding the tape, he started running home. He passed an appliance store with TVs in its windows, all showing the same channel. Jay stopped. For some reason, he just had to stare at the flickering video. It was some soap opera. The images blinked once, and then, one by one, switched to the flying dragon. Jay gasped. There were now 20 dragons flying through a weirdly purple sky. All of them were staring right at Jay, and they were getting closer. With every ounce of strength he had, Jay wrenched himself away. He was still holding the cassette. He threw it in a trash can and ran home. In the living room, Jay's dad was watching TV. Jay flinched with fear, but it was only football. A normal, regular old football game. What a relief. Jay was on his way up to his room when the sound of the game faded away. The picture flickered, and suddenly, the dragon filled the screen, even bigger than before. Once again, Jay felt his eyes lock on the screen, and now, it was easy to see who the dragon was holding in his claws. It was Mr. Rodriguez. Jay screamed.
Ah!
His father turned and stared at him. "Hey, what's up?" he asked. Jay's heart was pounding. He pointed wordlessly at the screen. Jay's dad turned and looked at the TV. It was a football game again. The dragon had gone. Jay wondered if he was going insane. He slowly backed away, then went crashing upstairs. He ran into his room and slammed the door. But he had forgotten about his TV in the corner. When he turned around, it switched itself on. Jay tried to scream, but nothing came out. He tried to run, but everything felt like molasses. The dragon filled the TV screen, and Jay found himself walking slowly, stiffly toward it. The dragon was getting closer. Its red eyes glittered, its neck muscles stretched as its wings beat the air. And the grinding, whirring sound was almost deafening. But what was that other sound? A voice. A human voice. It was Mr. Rodriguez. Very faint but distinct. It's only a dream, Jay thought frantically. Wake up! But he couldn't stop himself from slowly, surely moving forward. It was like a giant magnet was pulling him, and he couldn't break free. A glass of lemonade was standing on his night table. With all his strength, Jay managed to grab it, just as the dragon came crashing through the TV screen in an explosion of smoke and fire. Jay couldn't throw the glass, not that it would have helped. So, desperate, he did the only thing he could think of to wake up. He poured it over his head. And choking and gasping, he could finally scream. Ah! Jay blinked. He was lying in bed. The dragon was gone and morning sunlight was streaming in. His heart was hammering and his throat was dry. At the foot of his bed, the TV was on, but the picture was a mess of static. The door opened, and Jay's mom came in. "What was that noise?" she asked. She noticed the TV. "Jay, did you go to sleep watching another horror movie? No wonder you have nightmares. Look, you're covered in sweat." She sniffed the air. "And why do you smell like lemons?" Jay was soaking wet, and there was something tickling his chest. He waited until his mom left before pulling the covers away so he could see what it was. His t-shirt was completely shredded. When he held the cloth together, he could see that there were 4 long gashes through it, just like the ones that he had seen on the floor of the video store. Scratches from a dragon's claws. Claws that came too close.
Excellent story, Gary.
Yeah, it was cool.
Glad you guys liked it.
So, are we ready for another?
Sure,
You bet.
Who's next, me or Sam?
you go.
Okay, here goes. This is a story about loneliness and making friends. What's so scary about making friends? Plenty, if your new friend likes to play some very dangerous games. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, I call this story The Tale of the Lonely Doll. Janine was playing a video game when she had the weird feeling someone was watching. She looked up, and there was her kid sister Mary staring at her with her big eyes. Mary was always hanging around, sucking your thumb, saying nothing. It drove Janine crazy. "Yeah, what do you want?" "Look what you made me do." "Wanted to show you something," Mary said. As always, Janine felt immediately bad for yelling at Mary. She was only a kid after all. "Show me what?" she asked, more nicely. "I got a new friend," said Mary, holding something out. "Look." It was a dirty, ragged doll, missing most of its hair. "Ew," said Janine. "That's disgusting." "But she talks," said Mary. "Listen." She pulled a ring that hung out of the doll's back.
Hello. My name is Talking Terry. I like my new home.
That voice gave Janine a funny feeling. Mary was smiling at her doll, but the doll seemed to be staring at Janine. Its plastic eyes glittered. Janine stepped back. "Who gave it to you?" she asked. "No one," said Mary. "I was out back by myself. Talking Terry said she's my friend." Janine felt bad again. Mary was by herself because her big sister wouldn't play with her. Their mom was always scolding her about it. But that doll was disgusting. It was really gross. Janine turned and headed out of the room. The two girls shared a bedroom, and there was a big trunk where they kept all their stuff. To Janine's disgust, Mary wanted to keep Talking Terry in the trunk. Their mom backed her up. Even though the doll didn't look very nice, Mary had every right to keep it. But Janine had a hard time going to sleep that night with that thing in their room. She kept thinking she heard noises coming from the trunk. And when she finally fell asleep, she had a terrible dream. The doll was crouched over something, ripping at it like an animal.
I'm your only dolly now.
Janine screamed and woke with a start. It was morning. She looked across the room and gasped. It looked like the trunk had exploded. All their toys and dolls were scattered across the floor, broken, shredded, ripped to pieces. Janine ran to the trunk and looked in. There at the bottom was Talking Terry, staring up and grinning. The door opened and their mom came in. "What on earth?" she said. "Who did this?" "That did," Janine cried, pointing. "That thing." Their mom frowned. "Janine, you're in charge of this room," she said. "Clean this up at once." Janine grabbed the doll. It was weirdly hot, almost as if it were alive. She ran to the window, opened it, and threw the doll out as hard as she could. She watched it land behind some bushes at the far end of the yard. When Janine came home from school, her mom scolded her. "You're lucky we found that doll," she said. Mary was almost hysterical looking for it. "But Mom," Janine interrupted, "it's not a normal doll. It's really..." There was a sudden crash. Janine and her mom ran upstairs. The heavy trunk had somehow flipped completely upside down. Underneath, Mary's muffled voice was screaming hysterically. Their mom yanked the trunk off. Mary was curled in a ball, holding her head and crying. The doll lay a few feet away near the bed. It was staring up at Janine with that awful smile. Suddenly, it said in its scratchy voice,
Now it's your turn to play.
Janine kicked the doll as hard as she could. "Now do you believe me?" she shouted. It almost killed her. Mary was put to bed. She wasn't badly hurt, but she wouldn't stop crying. "Why did she do that?" she wept. "She was my friend." That afternoon, Janine grabbed the doll and headed outside. There was smoke in the air. Mr. Fletcher down the street was burning leaves in his yard. Janine pretended to watch the bonfire and smiled at Mr. Fletcher, who was raking leaves. She waited until his back was turned, then threw the doll into the flames. She turned and ran before he could see what she did. The next day was Saturday. Mary was well enough to go out, so their parents took her with them when they went to visit friends next door. Janine was left alone to watch TV, which was fine with her. At first, Janine, curled in front of the TV, thought the scratching sound was part of the movie. Then she hit the mute button and listened. What was that? Janine held her breath. Was it her imagination? But no, there it was again. With a sick feeling, Janine realized the sound was coming from the front door. Something was out there trying to get in. Janine stood up, her heart pounding. "It's a cat," she said, even though she knew it wasn't. "Shoo, go away!" But the noise didn't stop. It went on and on, like fingernails dragging down a stone wall. Janine ran to her room, dove into bed, and pulled pillows over her head. But she could still hear it, and she knew it was out there, waiting to be let back in. Janine knew what she had to do. Trying to feel brave, she walked back down to the door. The scratching stopped as she grabbed the handle. "Okay," she said to herself. 1, 2, she hesitated, and 3, she yanked the door open. The doll was standing there blackened and charred almost beyond recognition. It fell forward, its eyes glinting.
Hello, my name is Talking Terry, and I'm going to...
Janine slammed the door as hard as she could on the doll's neck. The doll's head was now dangling by a wire, the eyes popping open and shut. Janine grabbed an umbrella. She opened the door and, taking aim, swung the umbrella with all her might. The doll went flying, its broken body turning over and over past the hedges and across the lawn. The scream faded away as Janine slammed the door. That afternoon, a girl was wandering down the sidewalk. She was lonely and wished she had someone to play with. She tripped over something and stopped to see what it was. It was weird, a round, black object the size of a baseball. It was so gross she almost threw it away. But something cool happened. Bright blue eyes suddenly fluttered open in the ball.
Hello, my name is Talking Terry. I want to be your friend.
And then, terribly, it smiled.